After last week's episode of Doom Patrol, I totally thought that Immortus was going to be raining down the terror on the team right as we started this week. However, it took an entirely different spin, and by the end of the episode, it's where Immortus really doomed the Doom Patrol. So let's talk about episode 10 and what happened during it, because it did progress the characters yet again and set up some interesting stuff with 2 story points for what's to come in this season. So the first thing we need to talk about is how the episode started, and we're gonna talk more about the butts, because the butt apocalypse has started. The one we saw way back at the beginning of the season has finally come forward. The butts are here to attack. It turns out the butts seem to have erased their names off of everything so that they could live in isolation without anyone being able to see them, because the butt hunter did not know that they were still around. However, they hire him because they need his expertise for some reason, which by the end of the episode, they probably turned him into a butt. This is already weird as shit, and that's what the Doom Patrol does, because then we catch up with Nicholas the butt, which was the one that kind of fell in love with that scientist, and they grew old together. It turns out the butts that went after the butt hunter, they are starting a revolution because they feel like they've been betrayed, they've been treated like monsters, and they're not having it anymore, and they're gonna rebuild the world in their own image, which kind of plays into what Isabelle is doing by Immortus wanting to change the world in her own image. So we got 2 opposing groups who want to do whatever the hell they want in this world. And of course, we only have one team of wacky heroes to stop them. The interesting part too is the fact that Teddy turned Nicholas's wife into a werebutt so that Nicholas would join their cause, which just saying werebutt in itself is such a random term and is pretty fun. But these werebutts are going around and turning people into more butts. But I feel like Nicholas is gonna turn on the other butts mostly because of what they did to his wife. I feel like the dude is gonna want to get revenge on that part and also just stop this whole revolution from happening, because all he wanted to do was live his life and he's being dragged right into it. But we'll dive more deeper into everything going on with all those butts at the end. So when we talk about the characters and where they went this episode, of course, Vic had the biggest character development, because after the last few episodes, they've really been progressing his character to becoming cyborg again. And I really like what they did, because they brought him to go see his father, and they had a really good heart-to-heart recognizing both of their traumas, which is, again, I'll say this over and over again, the show does a really good job at showing us what these characters have gone through and then how they're trying to overcome it. Because when he goes to see his father, they talk about how both of them were hurt after they lost his wife slash mother. Vic felt like there was a hole in him. He doesn't know what to do, and he's asking his father what he should do, and I like how his father turns around and is like, well, a man knows what he wants to do. He doesn't have other people tell him what to do, kind of pushing Vic into this new role where it's like, okay, if you feel like you need to be cyborg, I'm not going to make that decision for you. You have to make it yourself. And I really like what they did, because it points out that when he was cyborg, he felt like he was a shell of a man. And by getting rid of that tech, he thought he would make him whole again. All because that event that turned him into cyborg was also the same event that made him lose his mom. Because of everything that happened to him, he realizes that the part he lost that day is never coming back. And him getting rid of the tech was not the answer to making him whole again. So I like what they did that, because, you know, he said he might not be able to feel whole again. However, in the end, being a hero and finding the proper team that accepts him will probably make him feel whole again. He left his dad, his friends, and ran away from all his problems because he was grieving. And that was the only reason he didn't really like stay around to try to deal with that trauma, which makes sense. And I love how he points out that his dad was also grieving. So he kind of recognizes that some of the things that his dad did that weren't so good was because this man was grieving losing his wife and almost losing his son. So he was going through a lot as well. And both of them had their own kind of journeys to go on to develop as characters. So I like how they had that father-son moment and really pushing Vic to being cyborg again. But we'll talk about that again at the end of the episode, because I feel like each section we're going to go through here is all tying up at the very end, which I can't wait, because that had its own little consequences that are going to set up some interesting stuff for the final 2 episodes of the season. So the next 2 characters we're going to talk about are Larry and Rita. First of all, we have Larry just digging himself a grave. He's pretty much given up at this point, and they kind of point that out through most of the episode, that he's given up. There's no hope for him. He even gets mad at Mr. 104 for giving him hope. All he sees is his death, and that's all he can talk about, and that's all he's focused on. And I think it's a big thing with his character this episode is he's trying to find somewhere for Keeg to go, because he feels bad. He doesn't want Keeg to be left alone, but he's not doing anything to prevent himself from dying. And I think that's also probably why Keeg was mad at him in the future, was because instead of trying to find a way to fix everything, he gave up. He gave up, accepted death, and didn't even try to figure out what to do. He just hit a brick wall, and he's like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Instead of just trying to bash bash through it and go forward. But by the end of it, Larry does kind of come to the realization after going with Rita, which we're going to talk about Rita right now. She's getting even older by the second. I think she's the oldest out of all of them. She feels like she's also given up in a way. Instead of giving up on her life, she's given up on the fight, where she thinks like, you know what, it's not that bad. You know, I'm going to die soon anyways. I just want to live my life with my friends before everything goes. But then everyone leaves her. She tries to have a dinner and no one shows up, of course, because Cliff and Jane left to go to Florida. And then Larry is only talking about death. She even saying that Immortus wasn't that bad. So I think Rita is at this point is trying to live her life, and I think that's a big thing with her character. She's always trying to fight. She's been doing that this entire time, but at this point she realizes there's a chance she may not be able to fight anymore, and instead of continuing down that path, she wants to find some peace. And that's what she's trying to come to. But also the fact that she's kind of also given up on the team because she's tried so hard over and over and over again to keep them together, and they just all ditched her. They didn't seem to appreciate her at all. Even like in the beginning of the season, when they voted for Madame Rouge to be the team leader, they gave up on their friend, someone who's always there for them, but they never seem to be there for her. And I really felt bad for Rita in this moment because she's right. She has this family. They're all dysfunctional. They all have their own problems, but then they just ditched her because they're also isolated on what their problems are rather than trying to deal with it as a group. By the end, they finally overcome that, but we have to talk about Jane and Cliff first before we get there, because Jane is trying to put the puzzles together after what Casey said to her. They're different colors and they're in different shades. However, she's able to start connecting some of them, which brings her to the underground where there's only clothes but none of the personalities. They're all missing. Their clothes are there, but it seems like they're all dead. However, it's looking like because of what's happening with her longevity being gone, her mind's starting to scramble because she even thinks that she has dementia. That might play into her mind isn't so clear, so she's not able to kind of pull those other personalities out. And at the same time, the trauma that Kay went through as a child with her father is starting to come up. And I think that's a big role about why the personalities might not be there and why all these other things are happening to Jane, is because the seated trauma that's in her and Kay's memories is starting to reveal itself again, making her kind of close off and be alone. However, facing that trauma and the abuse she went through as a child might be her key to unlocking those personalities again and putting the puzzle together. In this episode, the puzzle pieces did start to go back together after she was kind of living in the moment and enjoying time with her friends. So maybe that's the key, is them acting as a family and actually being there for one another and supporting each other is how these characters are going to move past everything and face their trauma together. And I think Cliff did the one selfless thing this episode after saying he had to go to Florida to see his daughter and grandson. And he was so adamant, he dragged Jane along, almost got them in an accident because he couldn't move his leg after pushing on the gas. And then when Jane was driving, she started getting memories of Kay's father, almost crashes. Also saying that she keeps hearing say it, which might be the other personalities, not just dementia, telling her that she needs to address this trauma to move past it. And then this is where Cliff does something selfless and he's like, let's go home. Because he realizes Jane's not in her right mind and he's not in his right mind and they can't go anywhere. They have to be with their friends who are also aging. They're all in the same predicament. They all lost their longevity and they're all dying. So when we get them all back together, we have this really good moment where you have Larry saying he shut himself off from having another family. That's why he couldn't get close to Mr. 104. And then Rita telling him that he does have a family because the Doom Patrol is a family. They're together. They've been living with each other for how many years now? And they've all dealt with so many things together that they aren't blood related, but they are a family. And I really like the little comments they made once Cliff and Jane walk in and they hear about Mr. 104 and Larry. They kind of like poke fun of him like friends do. Like, oh, you're interested in this person? Oh, why don't you go get him? And it's just like fun stuff like that where this is where they really start to feel like a team and people together. Like, I like it because when they're sitting all together, they're kind of starting to reminisce about everything. Even though they are dying, they start to remember the good old days. They talk about living in Cliff's racetrack, which happened back in season 2, episode 1 in Fun Size Patrol, where they're all shrunken down and we're living on that track. They even talk about how Jane shoved a baby up a sex demon, which happened in season 2, episode 4, titled Sex Patrol. So just like fun things like that, where they're reminiscing about the past seasons and we're diving back into that. And I think in this moment when they're all reminiscing about the past, starting to like heal and have a good time rather than focusing on all the impending doom, that's also why, like I said before, why the puzzle pieces starting to go together. Because Jane is starting to let those emotions out, talk, be open. Kind of like, you know, therapy, but not really therapy. And I like what it's doing because it's setting up these characters to kind of overcome their trauma together. Rather than trying to deal with it by themselves, together they're stronger. Even seeing how Rita was getting emotional about loving the Doom Patrol and even Vic and Rouge, and realizing that this is their family. And then he kind of pieces together all of them that Rouge went to the play that Isabelle was having, which at the beginning of the episode, Isabelle came to invite the Doom Patrol to her new play, and only Rouge went. So Rita realizes, of course, they have to go get her. And I think in this moment, Rita also realizes, oh shit, Rouge just went to go face the enemy by herself. Seeing the other characters like, oh, we don't need to save her, she chose to do it, was kind of like one of those more selfish moments where they weren't thinking, oh, you know, Rouge decided to go do it, so we don't need to go save her, even though they probably should have went to go save her. And I think it's a big thing for their characters to also overcome, because by this point, after Rita falls and passes out, so looking like she's dying of old age right in front of them, they realize they have to do this for her. They have to stop Isabelle, and they have to save Madame Rouge and Rita, because if they don't, everything's going to shit. Rita tried so hard to be the hero. She tried to pull the team out to be proper superheroes, and I think in the moment when they see that their friend is going to die, they're not ready to give her up. They're not going to let her just die, and they all come to the realization in their old age that they have to step up and be the heroes for once. Which, let's now jump into Madame Rouge and Isabelle, because while the whole episode was going on, they were doing their own thing at the theater, because you had Isabelle doing her ridiculous play, and I love when she went to invite Rouge to it, because they even said that the Doom Patrol keeps Isabelle grounded, which just made no sense. And it's also kind of why I think Isabelle, even though she is pretty crazy, that in the end she might not be so evil. But you know, when she was doing her play, that was absolutely ridiculous, showing her time in the time stream and what her life has gone through, even mentioning how Madame Rouge let her fall into the time stream, and of course the people watching her laughed at her, which was a really bad idea to do, because why would you piss off an omnipotent god? To be fair, they probably don't know she's an omnipotent god, but it was a bad thing that they did, because they look like they all got erased from time. However, this is where it sets up that Immortus just wants to be accepted. My theory ideas start to kind of twist here, because Immortus wants to be accepted, and the only people that wouldn't accept a weirdo like this would be the Doom Patrol. However, when Rouge kind of bonds with her a little bit, I think this is Rouge kind of playing with her, but she talks about how the only place she really felt accepted was when she was with the Brotherhood of Evil, because they didn't judge her, and she misses them because of that, which is really interesting, because I feel like the Doom Patrol does accept her. However, after the last couple of things that have happened in the recent episodes where Rita was her friend, kind of turned on her, it makes her feel not accepted, and it makes her feel shitty, which makes sense when you have the person that you think is your friend turn around to you and be like, no, you're just a bad guy, you're the reason for everything bad that's happened. It's gonna make you kind of turn evil. However, I really like where this went, because Isabelle kind of turns around, it's like, I should make people fear me to love me. World domination is the way to go. And of course she wants Rouge to be her super villain team, because Rouge was a villain at one point. It makes a really big setup for this part, because when you get to the ending that we're going to talk about now, Isabelle's going crazy. She wants to rule the world, maybe the galaxy, like she wants to have full control. However, once Rouge notices the growth that is on Immortus, she realizes that's how we're going to save the Doom Patrol, because earlier in the episode she was showing the Doom Patrol the growth that Immortus had on her back was the same shape as the pendant that Niles had, because at some point in time it fell off Immortus through the time stream and ended up at Niles, which gave him his longevity. And now it's all tying back together. At some point in time, Immortus lost the growth that gave them their power. It fell into the time stream, Niles got it, then Niles gave the Doom Patrol longevity, and then the Doom Patrol gave up the longevity, Immortus came back and now has their growth again. And now to get their longevity back, they have to get the growth off her again. So it's kind of setting up, it's like a bunch of events where it's like, you got rid of it, came back, got rid of it, now it's coming back. So it's interesting what they're doing here, but this is the moment where Rouge kind of realizes, I can save my friends. Even though they're complete dicks and half the time they don't listen to me, I'm still gonna save them. It brings up her character being like, I'm not gonna make those same mistakes again, showing that she realizes that she was a villain. She was a bad person, but she's truly trying to be better. She's trying to be the hero. She doesn't want to be a bad person anymore. And I like that, because instead of regressing her character like some of the other characters have been, and I like how they're doing it, but then it just sets up everything that went bad afterwards, because they all got sucked into the time stream, because Immortus is pissed off and just threw them all in there. The only reason they all got thrown in there is because the team went to go save Madame Rouge, and then the butt apocalypse started, because all the butts are pissed off after last season where the Doom Patrol killed a bunch of them. So they went back after them to get the revenge, because the revolution has started. And it was awesome to see that Cyborg came to the rescue in his full Cyborg getup with the tech on. I thought he was gonna look a little different to be this new and improved Cyborg. I mean, he technically did get a new cannon because him and Derek designed one, but he still looks very similar to his old design. I love the comment when he came back, because Cliff is like, oh, BB-8's back. So another Star Wars reference in this episode. So I think that's 3 episodes in a row now where we've gotten Star Wars references. But they all got sucked into the time stream except Rita. So something has to happen here, because now that they're in the time stream, someone has to break them out. And currently the only person that's not in the time stream is Rita. But at the same time, Immortus and the Butt Apocalypse have started. So we have 2 conflicting villains who are trying to take over the world. Obviously, Immortus is probably going to be able to take out the Butt. And that's why I still think that she might be the secret weapon to stopping the apocalypse from happening. So maybe if the Doom Patrol accept her, treat her like a friend, that she may be able to come onto the good side, because all she wants to do is be accepted. Immortus wants people to love her, and realistically, you want to know how people are going to love you in this kind of world? You join a superhero team and you save people's lives. So I think that's where they're setting up for this character, because one of the villains has to turn, and I don't think the Butts are going to turn to be the heroes in the end. I think Immortus, who seemed to be this big bad of the entire season, is truly going to be the one to help them stop the apocalypse and stop the world from being doomed. But we will see what's going to happen, because the werebutts have started to multiply, and that is already crazy in itself when you watch people turn into walking butts. But let me know, what did you think about this episode? Were there any Easter eggs that you noticed that I might have missed? And what do you think about all the character progression that happened during this episode and so far this season? I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you guys next week. Don't forget to leave a like and hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with all my Doom Patrol breakdowns, Marvel, DC, and all that. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you guys later.